I'm Nick, and I'm here to talk about how raising the federal minimum wage to $10 wouldn't work to solve the affirmative claims. So first of all, minimum wage, low minimum wage isn't a significant factor in poverty. In fact, education is a huge factor in poverty. And according to Brian Hickman, the root cause of poverty is lack of education. If you can't read or do basic math, you can't show up to work and apply yourself, you will not have a job. You will be poor. Other actions may dent poverty, but the war on poverty is 50 years old and the gains are few. Secondly, raising the minimum wage is impractical for areas with lower costs of living. So for example, living in San Francisco is significantly higher than living in like Alabama or something. So according to Mark Perry, in regard to significant differences in regional costs of living, it is important to factor that policymakers frequently overlook when proposing legislation like uniform one-size-fits-all $10 per hour national minimum wage. In fact, regional differences in purchasing power make a national minimum wage unworkable for low-wage, low-cost communities. So what he's pretty much saying is that if we set like a one-size-fits-all $10 an hour federal minimum wage across the board, areas that have low costs of living would disadvantage from that, because then everything would be higher, and it wouldn't be proportional to, it wouldn't be the same as like in other areas. And then he goes on to say, even proponents of minimum wage would have to concede that universally applied minimum wage without any adjustments for the significant differences in the cost of living across the country has to have disproportionate effects by location. To add on to that, and just to prove like how big the difference is in cost of living, Mississippi has the lowest cost of living at 83.5% of the national average, while Hawaii has the highest at 168.6% the cost of living. So just imagine having a federal minimum wage the same across the board. It wouldn't help either Hawaii or Mississippi. Adding on to that, Andrew Biggs and Mark Perry state that government-mandated minimum wages are always arbitrary and are almost never based on sound economic or cost-benefit analysis. In contrast, market-determined wages reflect supply and demand conditions that are specific to local markets and vary by geographic region and industry. And in fact, actually, many states have already increased minimum wage to reflect the cost of living in each region. So, for example, like here in California, we recently changed the minimum wage to $10 an hour. And this is just a statistic from the U.S. Department of Labor. 29 states and Washington, D.C. have set minimum wages above the federal minimum of $7.25 an hour. As of July 1st, 2016, the highest is Washington, D.C. at $11.50, followed by California and Massachusetts at $10. And so already states are already taking action to adjust the minimum wage for like their costs of living in each state. And another thing from the Department of Labor, federal minimum wage for covered non-exempt employees is $7.25 an hour. $7.25 per hour effective July 24, 2009. The federal minimum wage provisions are contained in the Fair Labor Standards Act. Many states also have minimum wage laws. In cases where the employee is subject to both state and federal minimum wage, the employee is entitled to the higher of the two minimum wages. So what this is saying is that even though the federal minimum wage is $7.25, if the state has a higher minimum wage, then the employee is subject to receiving that higher pay. So there's already laws in place that take care of this. There are some disadvantages to raising the minimum wage. According to a study in 2014 by Campbell Harvey, 40% of CFOs would reduce employee benefits if the minimum wage was raised to $10 an hour. And so if the minimum wage was raised, employee benefits would diminish. Not only that, raising minimum wage would also lead to a loss of jobs. According to Natasha Chen, some staff at the Seattle area nonprofit organization Full Life Care asked for a reduction in hours after minimum wage was raised, citing concerns that the increase will mean that they will lose their housing subsidies, yet they are still unable to afford market rate rents. And another statistic here from the Brain Research Institute states that 2 million US jobs were outsourced in 2015, with 44% of companies saying they did so to reduce or control costs. So this just shows how raising minimum wage would actually lead to a loss of jobs and a loss of benefits. And not only that, but raising minimum wage is detrimental to small communities. So in areas like Mississippi, where the cost of living and the average incomes are especially low, employers would need to spend proportionally more to pay their minimum wage employees than employers in high costs like Hawaii. And yet they would be unable to cover the cost by raising prices because their customers would not be able to afford them. And that's it.